Hello, this is Zahil Alum. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. My guest today is Dr. Sarah Sewell. She is Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights at the U.S. State Department. Dr. Sewell was sworn in as Undersecretary on February 20, 2014, and over the previous decade, she taught at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where she served as Director of the Kerr Center for Human Rights Policy and directed the program on national security and human rights. She was one of the President Barack Obama's transition advisors for foreign affairs and oversaw National Security Program review. We welcome Dr. Sarah Sewell on Frankly Speaking.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Deeply delighted to have you on my show on Frankly Speaking special today. Thank you so much. We know, Dr. Sewell, you're a long-term advocate for advancing civilian security and democracy, and you're representing the United States, and this is your first visit to Bangladesh as Undersecretary of State.
That's right.
So how does it feel visiting
Well,
Bangladesh?
it's really exciting to be here. You know, there is such a long history of ties between the American people and the people of Bangladesh, and it's an honor to be here as part of that long-standing relationship between both our peoples and government. I think Bangladesh has been such a shining light in terms of the progress that it has made over past decades, and it has made so many contributions now on the international stage in facing some of the global challenges that we all face. And so I'm really excited here to be here to continue in that discussion and that partnership.
We know whenever the U.S. officials, top officials visit Bangladesh, definitely the United States have some pressing demands, some objectives, some goals to achieve. And when you look at the countries like Bangladesh, where are the major, very briefly, where are the major concerns or the interests relating to Bangladesh?
Well, I, of course, come here as a representative of the U.S. government, but my particular focus within the State Department is in working with partners worldwide to address both human rights challenges and national security challenges. And I've been particularly focused lately on how to strengthen partnerships with those who are facing the threat of violent extremism. And that's been a significant focus of my visit here in Bangladesh.
Dr. Sarah Sewell, definitely no denying that the violent extremism poses a grave threat to different countries across the world, and definitely for the United States and Bangladesh as well, it presents a common challenge. So, if we look at the strategies of dealing with this menacing problem, where you will focus on?
Well, we have very strong partnerships already with the government of Bangladesh on many of the more hard side efforts to combat terrorism, and we're very proud and grateful of that partnership. Whether it's in strengthening aviation security or strengthening policing capacity, these are areas in which we've worked very closely with the government here, because we all share an interest in confronting the scourge of terrorism. What I've been focused on more recently, and what I am looking forward to expanding cooperation with the government on now, are some of the softer side measures to prevent the spread of violent extremism. President Obama and Secretary Kerry have both pointed out that we can use military tools to kill or law enforcement tools to arrest the current terrorists that exist. But we are all interested in protecting the children of our nations from becoming that next generation of terrorists. And so that's really the key area that I think we can continue to expand on in our cooperation, and I've come to learn about the government of Bangladesh's efforts on the prevention side.
So, okay, definitely, when you're looking at Bangladesh, where the root causes, where the problem lies regarding emergence of or the rising violent extremism or something like that in Bangladesh especially?
Well, I am, of course, not an expert on Bangladesh in the way that the government and the people of Bangladesh are, and I think all of our nations are in the process of trying to better understand the root causes of violent extremism in our own countries. I know for the United States, one of the interesting phenomena that we've observed is that increasingly we see some of the self-radicalizing individuals coming from non-Muslim backgrounds, and that is now a larger proportion of the population that we're concerned with, that's an interesting observation, and we need to be addressing that. Here in Bangladesh, I think that there is a great interest in making sure that the voices of moderation within the Islamic community are able to fully convey, express, and educate the population about the Islam that they believe represents the true faith. I think that is something that we've heard from in terms of the role of the Islamic Foundation here. We've heard a lot about, just this morning I was meeting with a group of civil society experts who are engaged in a very interesting new internationally supported program called GSURF, the Global Community Resilience Fund. The role that these civil society actors will be playing in cooperation with the government and with the GSURF Fund is to help strengthen community resilience, to promote dialogue within communities, and to really speak to vulnerable youth within the targeted areas so that they can envision a future for themselves that is positive and integrated into mainstream Bangladeshi society. These are very interesting and exciting and important ways that the whole of society within Bangladesh can work to prevent the emergence of that next generation of extremists.
In that context, can we ask you about the state of, the way the United States look at Bangladesh, the space for civil society, how effective, how transparent, how functional the power of civil society, the way they are contributing for development of the society and to challenge this type of problem like violent extremism?
Our experience and the experience of many of our partners around the globe is that you absolutely have to, as a state, defend the rights of all members of the population and the space for all members of the population to operate peacefully in order to counter the narratives that draw people to radicalism. And so the same would hold true here in Bangladesh, of course. It's critical that the press be ensured that it has the full freedom to operate without constraints or pressures. It's essential that people are able to express different political views peacefully. And I think that these are critical elements in enabling that whole of society approach that is very much in the Bangladeshi tradition of tolerance and discourse and engagement. I think making sure that historically important and defining aspect of Bangladeshi identity is protected through the rule of law, through the adequate prosecution of justice for those who violate the law. Those are really key elements, and those are of course part of the dialogue that we have with the government. The extent to which this is not just consistent with Bangladeshi values, tradition, and identity. This is consistent with international law, and this is ultimately the most effective way to fight terrorism in a sustainable way.
But Sarah, when you find that in some countries, the protection of rights like freedom of speech or the right of media or the space for the political parties are limiting somehow or other, how do you react? How do you respond to that challenge?
Well, the United States, I must say, is very consistent about how it responds to that challenge. We're very open in our discussions, both with government officials and with civil society, about the key principles that we uphold, which we think also are critical for countering violent extremism. And those include what to many strikes people as an extreme version of freedom in the United States. We have a very permissive view towards speech, and we don't always like what our other citizens say, but we are tolerant and we express those differences peacefully. That freedom of the press and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly is something that is really central to our understanding of rights and security, and something that is a constant topic of discussion with all of our partners around the globe who are fighting this really horrible trend toward increasing radicalism in some cases, and understandably wish to exert control. And we're able to share with them some of the lessons that we've learned and seen from other partners, that ultimately that can be a very self-defeating proposition.
You are giving common sense, some common sense across the globe that governments around the world need to govern the country effectively, transparently, and inclusively, because to limit the grievances of allow violent extremists to impact new communities. But I mean, in that context, the Bangladesh government, if you have any observation that how transparently or how effectively or how inclusively things are moving on in a countries like Bangladesh.
So there's always room for improvement in any government. I mean, this has been one of President Obama's signal observations that we in the United States have to keep improving our own realization of the political process and the rights that we have stood for over time. And we're a country in which, despite having elected an African American president, we still face huge challenges of racism within our own country. So I think all democracies in particular are always striving to do better. I think among the most important aspects that I've heard from civil society here in Bangladesh is ensuring that there is a vibrant press that feels able to investigate and raise questions and encourage debate, and ensuring that for civil society organizations and for those who have peaceful views, that there is room for dissent and disagreement. What we do know, and of course the impulse is understandable, but we do know is that attempts to exert control in the name of security often backfire. And so for any government, including our own, the embrace of that, the protection of that space and the role of government in ensuring that even when it doesn't like what people have to say, that they are able to say it, and that the government will defend their right to say it. Because the government's role is not to agree or disagree with content. The government's role is to defend the right of all to express themselves. And so this is really critically important. One of the things that I'm so proud of President Obama for in the United States is that when we have had very ugly incidents in the US of violence against minorities of different kinds, it might be religious, it might be race, whatever, our president speaks out quickly and strongly and condemns those acts in the broadest terms and makes clear that the people who have been victimized are American, and they are all of us, and that we must defend them. You know, that's one of the most important things that governments can do, is particularly defending people whose views the right of those who have views that may differ from their own to express those views. I think that's part of Bangladesh's tradition, and I think that one of the things that has made Bangladesh so successful in the face of really great odds, I mean, it's economic development, the role of women, I mean, it's successes in the health realm, it's such a role model in so many ways for what it means to succeed as a nation internationally. One of the keys to its success has been protecting that space for a vibrant society to drive that change. Because obviously that kind of success can't come from government efforts alone. That success comes from the people. And the Bangladeshi people have enormous energy and promise, and they need to ensure, the government needs to ensure that they can realize that, because ultimately that's the way the nation succeeds.
As a leading nation like United States for pluralism around the world, do you think it does have very significant impact on the development of democracy and democratic institutions in Bangladesh?
I think pluralism, we regard in the United States pluralism as a huge asset, because it means that one is drawing on all elements of the society. You know, this case is often made in the context of women and development. You know, President Obama often points out that if you're not harnessing half of your population in your economic growth, you're missing out on huge dividends, economically as well as socially. And so this issue of pluralism, I think, is something that can feel very difficult to manage, because ultimately it's about reaching compromise and accommodation. But it is, I think, from our experience, our greatest strength. And so certainly in pluralistic societies around the globe, we are constantly urging both those who participate in that process as citizens, but also the governments in those countries to see this as a fundamental strength. I think that's been Bangladesh's history. And we're very confident that, that if that pluralism continues to be embraced and fostered, it will continue to serve as a driver of progress.
But is there any concern from your side regarding the increasing denial of space for opposition?
I think there's, like I said, I think there's always room for improvement in terms of legal protections, in terms of the administration of justice. I think, you know, in the United States, we are often frustrated by, citizens are often frustrated by how lengthy the court process is and feel that justice is so often deferred, if not denied. You know, those are certainly the kinds of concerns that I've heard here in Bangladesh as well. And one of the ways we're hoping to partner with the government is to expand our support for community policing, for specialized justice capabilities that we hope will enable the government to take even more swift action in the face of crimes and to become a better evidence of the administration of justice, because I think citizens around the globe are hungry for it, and I think it's something that we have to balance, you know, due process and careful procedures and protection of rights with a firm determination and commitment to get to the bottom of rights abuses. And so I think there's always room for improvement, and we're looking forward to partnering with the government of Bangladesh to strengthen judicial capacity.
Dr. Sarah, global community is very active about countering violent extremism. There are a lot of strategies evolving and enforcing to address this menacing problem. And we heard that last February you held a summit about countering violent extremism at the White House. What was the central message from that summit? There are a lot of participation or representations from around the world.
Yeah, it was a really exciting summit that President Obama hosted, and of course Bangladesh's foreign minister attended. We were sharing our lessons about our fight against terrorism over the last decade. And President Obama's core message at that summit was that we can't rely on military tools alone. We have to think about root causes, both the push factors that might make people vulnerable to extremist messages, but also about the pull factors, the extremist ideology that is so hateful and negative. And we have to start focusing on those elements of the challenge, because that's the long-term threat that we all face around the globe. The White House Summit was also really unique in that it engaged with civil society actors, and so that whether it was religious leaders or community leaders, youth, saying you're part of the solution too. This isn't just about governments. Okay. But the third piece that I think was really interesting about this summit, and this was a point made by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in February in Washington, is that the way states fight terrorism has to be consistent.
And he also released a comprehensive plan of action.
He did, and I'll come to that in just one sec. So his point at the White House Summit in February was the behavior of states matters. States have to abide by the rule of law. States have to protect the rights of citizens as they seek to arrest those who would violate the rights of citizens. And so that message of state responsibility and how they prosecute terrorism is now central in what you referred to as the UN Secretary General's plan of action. So this has gone from being a White House summit to really being a United Nations universal approach to balance the need for military and law enforcement efforts, which are absolutely essential in the fight against terrorism, with a more far-sighted approach that seeks to understand how it is that people could be able to seduce our children into these self-destructive, nihilistic messages of extremism and draw them to commit violence. So we have to be thinking about the prevention piece as well, and that's something that the UN General Assembly itself will be discussing in June in New York as they take up the UN Secretary General's prevention plan of action.
But collectively, how the global community hold the governments responsible who doesn't actually have right amount of a good degree of commitment about protecting rights or promoting rights of human rights and the other values of a country?
Ultimately, as you know, the United Nations is composed of states, and states must therefore police themselves in many respects of their behavior. I think one of the exciting things about the Prevention Plan of Action is that it suggests states should periodically discuss their records in how they fight terrorism. Another element of the Prevention Plan of Action that's really exciting is that the Secretary General invites all of the United Nations agencies, everyone from UNICEF, which supports children's rights, to the development program that funds development around the world, to UNESCO that works on education support around the world, to become part of this prevention effort. So it brings in a whole new set of UN actors and tools in a way that we hope will be paralleled by the way governments move beyond their security and intelligence apparatus to engage the Department of Education, the Department of Social Services, the much broader pieces of government work, as is beginning to happen in Bangladesh, which is really exciting. And the other piece I will just mention briefly is that coming out of the White House summit, there are now global networks for actors that aren't just governments. There's a strong cities network that we hope Dhaka will become a central player in, that helps bring civil society and local government together around the world to share lessons about how they can prevent violent extremism. There's a research network that connects international and very localized actors. There's GSURF, which we talked about just briefly, and there's a youth network to try to bring youth together around the world in promoting narratives of peace and tolerance. And so these are exciting developments that we look forward to seeing Bangladesh become more engaged in as other nations become more engaged in trying to solidify and institutionalize this energy around the prevention agenda. So this is just one other aspect of the conversations that we're having with the government here, both about our activities, our partnership, their activities, the role of Bangladeshi civil society and rights, and the international architecture.
From your department, the department you're representing, what message you extend to your partners about, when you see the targeting oppositions or limiting space again and using huge coercive power of the state to muzzle the voice of different emerging powers, positive powers in the society. How do you extend your message to them?
We talked to all of our interlocutors on this question of CVE about how important it is that the short-term actions taken in the name of fighting terrorism do not undermine the central rights and the space for all of society to feel included in governance and secure in their rights and their ability to express their beliefs, because this is ultimately a key to fighting terrorism, to preventing that next generation from becoming radicalizing. And so our constant message to all of our partners around the globe is that this is in the long-term self-interest of the nation to ensure that there are those protections, that security, and that space to include all citizens in determining the future of the country.
How effective the fight against IS around the world right now? We see this Syria situation, so now they are fanning out all over the world. In different countries, we're seeing grave incidents in Paris, in Brussels, in Lahore, in other parts of the world. So how effective the fight against IS?
Obviously, whenever there's a terrorist attack close to you, the impulse is to feel that the momentum is on the other side. I think what President Obama and Secretary Kerry have been seeking to help explain to the world is that the coalition against ISIS or Daesh is making success, and Daesh is losing territory, and that's a hopeful sign. That doesn't mean that we can let up on our efforts to continue to both attack Daesh affiliates around the world and work to dismantle those global networks, but it also means that we have to think about this prevention agenda. And to me, the most hopeful, the most positive, the most affirmative aspect of a fight against an enemy that seeks to tear down all of civilization that has been built is that we can look to this preventive agenda, that we have now an international consensus on this preventive agenda, and it gives us a way to really guide and focus our efforts to help protect our children, to help protect our citizens from being lured to violent extremist networks globally.
Bangladesh have been a very active contributor in international peace building efforts through contributing peacekeepers around the world. So how do you value Bangladesh's contributions in
I
this?
think Bangladesh has contributed in so many ways internationally. I mean, the United States has been so impressed with Bangladesh's leadership, not just on the peace building, the national security side in terms of its role in UN peacekeeping, but also in terms of combating climate change with the Prime Minister's designation as, a hero in that regard. So there are many aspects in which Bangladesh has been a critical player on the global stage. I think that CVE, this prevention of violent extremist agenda, is another area in which Bangladesh now is a target or a model country for GSURF engagement in terms of promoting community efforts to fight extremism. This is another area in which I think Bangladesh can play a leading role in showing other nations how to address these problems. And I am hopeful that the Bangladeshi people and the government of Bangladesh will take on this challenge. I know from the conversations that I've had with civil society members so far, the increasing radicalization is a deep concern. It's broadly felt, and everyone recognizes that the problem is extremely complex, and it requires both government actions and actions from other parts of society to address it. I've certainly sensed that there is the energy and the will to do that, and the United States looks forward to deepening its partnership to assist Bangladesh in its efforts going forward.
Dr. Sarah, finally, this visit you have made government, already, if not already meeting government officials, you have met civil society members and other stakeholders. So what sense you are getting back home, or you are carrying back home after visiting Bangladesh?
Well, I think on the issue of violent extremism, I think there is concern, and I think there is also a widespread commitment to act. And so, as Bangladesh has shown in so many other challenges, the resourcefulness of its people, the vitality here, the innovation and the commitment, I think, are limitless. And so I'm confident that as people focus on this problem, join the global community, share lessons, learn lessons, experiment and adapt, they can make significant progress in reducing the risk that the next generation will become radicalized.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah
Thank you for
Sewell,
having me here.
for joining me.
Thank
You so much. Dear viewers, that's all my conversation with Dr. Sarah Sewell, Under Secretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights from State Department. Thank you indeed for watching this program, and we invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, to take care. Goodbye.